serve as the co-chair for the Government Affairs Committee with Tech Chapman and Services for Independent Living. Before we begin, actually, not even in the script, before we begin, if everyone could please turn off their phones, just as a courtesy. I remember to do that as I walked in. Appreciate that. I would like to explain the format for today's forum. The candidates will each give a 2-minute self-introduction. Each candidate will then respond to a series of questions prepared by the chamber. Candidates will be allowed 1 minute to respond. Kara's holding the timer here, the iPad, and she'll hold that up when you have 30 seconds left, and then let you know when your time is up. Following the chamber questions, we will allow audience questions as time allows, and then we'll end with a 1-minute closing remark from each candidate. I'm going to turn it over to Tech for the first part.
Thank you, Tom. We're going to deviate a little bit right off the bat with our system that Tom just outlined. And got Councilman Thomas. We'll begin today, and for Councilman Thomas, since his opponent has suspended his campaign at this time, we're going to allow Councilman Thomas 3 minutes for a opening statement, and then we've got 3 prepared questions that we'll ask him. So you ready? Yes, sir.
Well, thanks everybody. Very good to be here. My name's Ian Thomas. I am the current 4th Ward City Councilman, and I'm running for re-election for another 3 years. My top 4 priorities, firstly, are to expand law enforcement. There's no question that our police department is understaffed. The amount of time they have a status 0 situation is far higher than we want it to be, meaning that every officer is currently engaged on a job, and the next call that comes in either has to be put on hold or somebody has to be pulled off a job they're working on. I do think we need to have some kind of an engaged community visioning about our public safety services, law enforcement, understand the challenges that the department is currently facing, the low morale, and feeling that the community doesn't appreciate the police department are big problems that we need to address. And I think an engaged, facilitated process that might take several months is needed to create that vision. Having done that, I really believe that the community will support the increased funding that we are going to need in order to address the staffing issues and be able to do a proper, proactive community police program. Second issue is infrastructure. We have a very ad hoc system of funding infrastructure which doesn't work well for anybody. I've been talking with a developer just today who's frustrated by ad hoc negotiated extra projects that are tacked on when a development is requested as an exaction, really, to put in a roundabout here or add traffic lanes. The problem really is that our standard development impact fees are too low. We compare them with how much we spend on expanding infrastructure for new development, and they don't cover it, don't come close. So a lot of the rates and taxes we pay that are supposed to maintain and repair what we've got are siphoned off to build new infrastructure. So we need to have a sustainable and predictable system that works well for everybody. Third thing is our local economy. I really support entrepreneurships in Columbia as well as supporting our local businesses. I think we need to do better at keeping our dollars in Columbia. I've asked Mike Mathis to go through our purchasing policies and strategies and make sure we're doing everything we can to purchase Columbia-based products and services for the city government. And we should have more of a program throughout the community to do that so that our tax dollars and our private dollars are supporting local jobs and local businesses. And over all of this, we have to address social equity. A large percentage of our population is systematically disadvantaged by a whole concatenation of different institutional policies and procedures and laws and so on, so that people really don't have a chance to get out of poverty to lead a productive life. And there's a lot we can do in all those other 3 areas: policing, infrastructure, and economy to address that.
Outstanding, right on time. Did you practice that?
No, I was keeping an eye on the clock. That was really nice to have that visual reminder.
Thank you, Kurt. The first question is, do you support building a new terminal building at Columbia Regional Airport, and how would you propose paying for this expansion?
I was a skeptic of putting a lot of public money into expanding the airport several years ago. I didn't see the evidence that this was a sustainable investment, that this was something that would serve the city well. But In the last 3 or 4 years, American Airlines has kept its flights full, has not tapped into the contingency fund with private and public money that we set aside. I use Columbia Regional Airport quite frequently. In fact, I'm going to be flying out next Wednesday, a day after the election, going over to England, a very convenient Columbia to Chicago, Chicago straight over to Manchester, where my family lives. So at the moment, yes, the terminal is inadequate. We need to come up with a plan to improve and expand it. I understand that federal grants will cover a lot of that. I think some sort of a local tax and quite possibly a hotel tax increase would be an appropriate way to provide the local match.
Thank you. The next question is, do you support changing to a form-based zoning system as outlined by the consultant hired by the city?
Absolutely, yeah. Yeah, I've been a fan of form-based zoning for many, many years. It is very appropriate in a kind of an urban, compact area like downtown Columbia. It creates the architectural attractiveness that brings streets to life, makes the pedestrian experience a rewarding one, and de-emphasizes parking lots and wide roadways for cars, creates this more kind of connected urban economy, which I really think that our downtown is, but the form-based zoning will create the aesthetics that really bring it to life.
Fantastic, thank you. The third question was about public safety, and it seems to me that you talked about that in your opening statement. So I'd really like at this time to open it up to questions from the audience that you may have. So I cut you all off guard because I said we're going to questions. So.
Councilman Thomas, in the urban environment you talked about with the form-based zoning, how do you address parking?
We need to improve alternatives to the private automobile. We need to dramatically improve our bus system. Tom, you and many others in the room were in Gainesville a couple of months ago, and we saw what a fantastic transportation system can exist if the big institutions in a city come together. So I will continue communicating with the University of Missouri, with Moberly Area Community College, Columbia College, and Stevens to find a way to encourage students first to use the bus more through some kind of a cost share system, but ultimately to produce a much better bus system for everybody. If we do that, then we won't have a parking problem. We won't have the kind of parking problem that a lot of people envision right now with our very woefully inadequate bus system. And we'll be able to use downtown space, this really valuable real estate, for much more productive things than storing cars.
Sean?
This question is probably only for me in this room. What is form-based zoning?
Form-based zoning is, it's easiest to explain in contrast to the standard zoning, which is use-based zoning. What we're most accustomed to is we take a map and we say, okay, this is residential, and this is commercial, this is office, industrial, and within these often very large areas, only that one use is allowed. The reason for that is, the historical reason for that is that people don't like living next to a factory or an enormous gas station. So it's to kind of provide protections, but it's a very blunt tool in my view, in that there could be some commercial activity in a neighborhood that would be very, very acceptable to people. A small coffee shop, a bookshop, a little grocery store, something that people could walk to, particularly senior citizens who may not want to drive for every single thing they do. Use zoning eliminates that. Form-based zoning focuses not on the use of the building, but on what it looks like, its kind of presentation to the street, the architectural features, and so on.
Yes, Joe.
Beyond your support for increasing resources for the police department, would you support a public safety commission in the city of Columbia that includes all public safety and emergency response agencies, fire, police, 911, joint communications, ambulance services, to comply with what is kind of a cutting edge or contemporary philosophy in the science and the structure of evolving, many communities much smaller than Columbia have public safety commissions. It might be a city-county commission, The philosophy is called all of nation or whole community, which means the civilian leaders and citizens are heavily involved with this commission to build trust and capacity and sustainability and the ability to respond to any type of disaster or emergency.
And it sounds as though this is kind of a citizens advisory commission that, that would oversee the various different public safety
Civilian and
agencies.
professional, yes.
It certainly sounds like a good idea. We do have the police review board, but that's a little different. They're really very specifically reviewing instances or allegations of police misconduct or failure to follow policies. So the idea of a commission that might be like, you know, somewhat like the Board of Health, but specifically over safety and public safety sounds like a very good idea. Maybe that's something that might come out of a community envisioning around the future of the police department.
Thank you. Ian, maybe give you a minute to
Okay.
give a closing statement.
All right. Well, if you live in the 4th Ward, I hope you'll go out and vote for me next Tuesday. I've worked very hard over the last 3 years to connect with constituents in the 4th Ward and throughout the city. I listen to what people say, I ask people what they think, I tell people what I think and ask them what they think of that through a variety of different means, email newsletters, my website, online surveys, coffee hours on Sunday afternoons. I do my best to study the issues in depth and really understand them. I hate to be asked to make a judgment on something and cast a vote if I don't know what I'm talking about. So I spend a lot of time on that. I enjoy it. I've learned a lot in the last 3 years about different aspects of municipal government through the process. And I believe that I'm a good representative of the citizens of the 4th Ward. So I hope very much to be able to serve you or them again for another 3 years. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Councilman Thomas. I'd like to now welcome our mayoral candidates forward, Skip Walther and Brian Treece. We will begin with opening statements, and Skip, I think we're going to start with you, and then we'll go to Brian, and then you have 2 minutes.
Okay.
Opening statement.
Thank you for inviting us. It's great to be here. My name is Skip Walther, and I am running for mayor. When I decided to run, it wasn't because that I had a specific agenda in mind, and it wasn't because I was representing any special interest group. I decided to run because we've all seen the polarization and the divisiveness at the national and state level. It's begun to filter down to the local level. Now, there's nothing a mayor can do about the national or state politics, but I certainly believe that I can affect the tone of city government. We don't have to fight about every single thing that comes before city council. What we ought to be doing is talking to each other, engaging in a process that is inclusive and transparent. And if we do that, then I think our public will have confidence not only in the process but in the result as well. And that's why I've decided to run for mayor. I've been an attorney in Columbia for 37 years, representing Columbians during that entire period of time. Perhaps that partially explains why I've received individual campaign contributions from over 330 people, almost all of whom are individuals within the city of Columbia. And it might, well, I'm also proud to have received the endorsements of every living mayor who I've gotten to know because I've practiced law in Columbia and I've worked downtown for so many years. I'm proud that I've gotten all of those endorsements, including one from Bob Smith, who is no longer with us. I've also received endorsements from Ernie Barbie, who was a police chief here for 10 years, as well as Ted Bain, who was the longest serving Boone County Sheriff we've ever had. I'm very proud of those endorsements, and I hope that I can live up to the respect that they're showing me with those endorsements. And so I'd ask you for your vote this coming Tuesday, April 5. Thank you.
Mr. Treece.
Thank you, and hello. I knew this was a setup. Look, it's great to be with you, and I think both Skip and I have been looking forward to this chamber event because it gives us a chance to talk about something other than downtown zoning, but I'm sure we're going to get into that. Not the least of which, it's also our last candidate forum together. And so I think it's appropriate that we look at the future of Columbia at the end of this campaign. You know, Columbia's a great city to live, raise a family, but we have a few challenges right now. And for the last 25 years, I've been an advocate in Jeff City on economic development and transportation issues and healthcare providers and job training. And I think that skill set transfers well to the challenges that we face right now. Here in Columbia, I've chaired the Historic Preservation Commission, where we led the effort to preserve and redevelop downtown. I currently chair the Downtown Leadership Council. That's the group that the City Council asked to look at our infrastructure issues facing downtown Columbia, and also the crisis of confidence that people have with how well the city plans and manages growth. You know, what we found was surprising. Our sewer and stormwater and electrical capacity hadn't kept pace with the rate of our city's growth, and our police and fire protection, law enforcement personnel haven't kept pace and fallen behind with the challenges that we face as a growing community. You know, if we're going to be one of the fastest growing cities in the Midwest, we need a blueprint. And as mayor, I want to build upon what's great in Columbia by using that blueprint to invest in our neighborhoods and improve our infrastructure, add more community policing, and make Columbia open, honest, and transparent. So I'm excited to get to work and ready to roll up my sleeves. And this is a great community that I think we can all work together to make even better.
Very good. So our first question is to Mr. Treece. It's a familiar question.
Roll cards.
I refuse to talk about that. Do you support building a new terminal building at Columbia Regional Airport, and how would you propose paying for this expansion?
I do support it, and look, we need to upgrade that facility, not only to meet our projected and peak demand, but homeland security requirements right now. And I've already talked to the city of Jefferson, the mayor there is a contemporary of mine, and I would like to pursue a regional airport authority that both the city of Jefferson and Columbia can participate in. I do have some concern about using a hotel tax for that without clear authority. I'm not opposed to the hotel tax, but right now the purpose to build an airport using that hotel tax is not an allowed expense. And so to guise it under the auspices of economic development probably is inviting a lawsuit to the city at a time when we really can't afford more lawsuits. But absolutely, I support a new terminal. I think we have companies like Veterans United and the University of Missouri that rely upon that airport to bring in their employees and to send their employees to other offices, satellite offices for VU in Dallas. And I think it's one of those scenarios that if we build it, they will come and we can fill that airport easily.
Mr. Walther, same question.
Yeah, well, first of all, the likelihood of Jeff City participating with Columbia at Columbia Regional Airport is probably zero. We floated that balloon a long time ago and it popped. Jeff City's got their own airport, and I cannot imagine why they would spend money on our airport when they've got their own. We need to expand our airport, we need to enlarge the runway, and we need to expand air service. How we do that is going to be a problem. I'm not sure that a lodging tax is the answer. I think we need to explore all of the particular taxes available to us before we go down that road. I'm encouraged that Larry Potterfield is developing a very large industrial complex right next to the airport. I think that's going to only benefit the airport. The city of Ashland is bringing a sewer to that area, which potentially is going to benefit the airport. And so there are lots of positive things that are moving forward. We need to focus on that airport because it's one of the critically important elements of Columbia.
Thank you. Second question will begin with you, Mr. Walther. Do you support changing to a form-based zoning system as outlined by the consultant hired by the city?
The form-based zoning code for me is a concern. I believe in government encouraging people to engage in behavior rather than telling them what behavior they're to engage in. With form-based zoning, the government is telling people what their buildings are going to look like and what they're not going to look like. I'm not sure, first of all, whether our city has the constitutional authority to engage in that behavior. But assuming that they do, there's a better way to do it. And that is the way that the CID, the Community Improvement District, has done. And that is, 2 years ago, we adopted a voluntary design guideline, a set of voluntary design guidelines for downtown Columbia. Buildings that have been built since October of 2014, when those guidelines were in place, have honored those guidelines, and those guidelines are a community consensus on what buildings downtown should look like. Encouraging people by showing them what can work and what should work is the best way for government to act.
Mr. Treece, do you support changing to a form-based zoning system as outlined by the consultant hired by the city?
I do, and but generally I support improving and upgrading our zoning ordinance. And that includes in part this form-based code, because the zoning ordinance that we have now was developed in the 1950s when our population was 50,000 people, and at the time, as Mr. Thomas indicated, we were regulating use in terms, as opposed to regulating the type of mixed use that we want to encourage downtown. And if we simply allowed the private market to voluntarily implement parking restrictions or use restrictions or the mixed use that we all want to really preserve a dynamic and diverse downtown community, it would already be happening, and it's not. And that's why I think we need to close the zoning loophole that allows this residential uses without any concomitant retail space, without any integrated parking requirement or a de minimis parking requirement, and really have the type of buildings that serve our community well for the next 50 years.
Our last prepared question, we'll start with you, Mr. Treece. What specific steps would you take as mayor to improve public safety?
Well, and I was the first candidate to be endorsed by the Columbia Police Officers Association and really call for a dramatic increase in how we staff and add more community policing to keep our neighborhoods and families safe. You know, the police officer that patrols my area comes on duty at 3 p.m., works till 3 a.m. And sometimes he has 22 calls pending, the earliest of which is someone who called 911 at 8:30 that morning. And if it takes him 44 minutes to clear each of those calls, more calls keep coming in and he never gets caught up. And so we wonder, everyone's scratching their heads wondering why our law enforcement personnel have low morale when they are spread too thin. We've cut their uniform allowance, we've cut their pension in half, and they're understaffed. So absolutely, I would like to earmark the growth in our budget to begin an incremental investment in adding more police officers, but that also extends to fire protection as well. Our firefighters, and I'm proud to have both the police and firefighters endorsement. We're down 2 fire stations. Our response times have ticked up, and the violent crime in this town has increased, according to ABC 17, 50% since 2015. And we need to stay on top of that.
And I'm going to take a little liberty
Please.
here. I'd like to give you another 30 seconds, and if you could describe some very specific steps.
Very specific
Very
steps?
specific steps.
Adding more police officers would be one. Department of Justice recommends 2.5 officers per 1,000 people. We're at 1.4. At that estimate, we're down 52 officers. We're not going to do that in the first year, but I think we need to, again, stay on top of those crime rates. Because a couple things happen. When officers don't respond immediately to a 911 call, pretty soon people stop calling 911, and that's not a desirable effect. And we're also putting law enforcement officers at risk because we don't currently have the opportunity to add double staffing and 2 men to a car. We need to add more community policing by making sure we have the same officers in the same neighborhoods at the same time to really develop the rapport and the respect they need with the citizens they serve.
Skip, the same question, and I want to make sure I extend the same amount of time to you as well.
Thank you very much.
We'll make sure you do that in 3 minutes.
I've been advocating for an incremental increase in the number of police officers since we began these debates. My opponent has on several occasions said that the growth in the city budget would immediately pay for 25 to 30 police officers in year 1, which isn't true. Our budget for police and fire comes out of the general fund. That's an $84 million budget. The growth between 2015 and 2016 is about $400,000 in the general fund. That's not going to pay for 25 police officers. So an incremental approach by using, we can use growth, but we also can, by being intentional in hiring police officers and fire department personnel. We have in the last 4 or 5 years increased the number of FTEs, full-time employees in the city of Columbia by about 120 or 30. And very few of those have been police officers. So we have the capacity to add FTEs to the city of Columbia. We need to add, we're growing so dramatically. We need to add people throughout city staff in all departments to cover all of the things that we have to do. But we can be intentional in allocating resources incrementally to gradually expand our police force so that we catch up to where we ought to be.
We'll turn to the audience for any audience questions that you might have for either of the candidates. Yes, sir.
Columbia, the city of Columbia trains, qualifies, and employs firefighters, police officers, bus drivers, and they stay in employment for a short period of time, then move on to other cities or private businesses because the pay and benefits are much better. What would you do to counteract that reality and get a trend or some kind of policies that would enhance retention of our public safety and transportation professionals in the city of Columbia?
Great research, Joe, and you're exactly right. I mean, all employers in this room know how much it costs to train and get an employee, and it's even more pronounced when you have to send an employee through police academy or fire academy and put them online. The simple answer to your question is pay our police officers more. Part of the challenge we have with the current environment is what's called salary compression, and that same police officer that patrols my neighborhood has been on duty for 12 years. He now supervises 7 people and is paid about 17 cents an hour more than the person. He's been there for 10 years, and the person that just got hired is bumping right up. So you can tell, I mean, what that does, and so that, I mean, even the starting salary at Boone County Sheriff's Department is more than some of our experienced officers here in the city of Columbia are already making. So the simple answer is to pay our police officers more. That requires additional resources, and you create that balance of, do we add more or take care of the ones we have? And I think the events in Ferguson probably show having a more experienced, more highly qualified, highly professionalized, organized police department is probably going to yield better results than if we're just buying the cheapest labor that we can in that environment.
You know, when I was in the prosecutor's office, we had a group of police officers that were just absolutely outstanding. And I don't practice criminal law anymore, so I can't speak to the quality of our police officers. But it would surprise me if our quality has dropped precipitously since the late 70s, early 80s. Columbia has always been an attractive place for employees to come and work and people to raise families. And I know we have a very competent human resource department at the city of Columbia. And I have to think that there are a variety of reasons why people leave town or choose to relocate other than simply pay differentials. So I would be very interested in discussing with the experts in human resources why, if there is a problem, why it's happening and ways that we can counter it.
Mr. Griggs. It's certainly no secret that I'm a very strong supporter of regional economic development, and I'm curious what your outlook is on Ready's performance and what you think, if anything, needs to change in it.
Well, you know, I don't share one councilman's skepticism of Ready. I find Ready to be an extremely valuable resource for the citizens of Columbia. We need to promote economic development in all ways possible. And Ready's participation in that regard is exemplary. And so I would, if I'm elected mayor, I would be enthusiastically supportive of all Ready's efforts in that regard, and would love to get on board and help out.
I'm glad you asked that question, David. 2 things. As mayor, I hope the rest of the council will join me in asking Ready to engage Veterans United in a discussion to find them a forever home in Columbia. We have over 2,000 employees, very highly paid employees, many families with 2 VU incomes, and I think it is in everyone's best interest to make sure that they have a home here that they can grow into and stay here forever. Second of all, I want to take those 3 things that Columbia does well, those 3 industries: financial services, Veterans United, Shelter, State Farm, healthcare between Columbia Orthopedic Group, Boone Hospital, and University of Missouri Healthcare, and then take culture between the MU documentary journalism, Citizen Jane, True False Film, you know, that new form of journalism and communication. But really ask Ready to help connect the dots between our educational institutions like Moberly Area Community College, Columbia College, MU, to really develop that curriculum that links the opportunities. Take someone from the First Ward that works at Lenore as a feeder. If they can connect with Moberly Area Community College to give them the extra education they need to become a CNA or an LPN, and show them an 8 to 10 year career pathway that they can make more money with hard work and education. To me, I'd much rather invest in our ready-to-work workforce here and have that in turn attract more companies to Columbia.
Great.
I'd like to return to public safety just because it seems like there's an elephant in the room that we're not paying any attention to. I'd like to know from each one of the candidates specifically how and where you would suggest finding the funding for additional police officers if the bar were, say, adding 9 or 10 per year over 5 years, and trying to find a way at the same time to, for instance, find 2% wage increases for existing meritorious police officers. Where do we go do we go back to the ballot again, or do we find it from somewhere else, and where is that other place?
Well, it's clear, and you can go first.
No, it's your turn.
Okay. You know, it's clear to me that we have to prioritize our budget with public safety. It's the #1 issue that the citizen satisfaction survey shows that people want their city government working on. 93% say crime prevention and public safety. To do that, look, there's a lot of smart people in this room. We have $1 billion budget. Half of that is water and light. 480 million is in on the other side in terms of administration. We can find the money to do that. But with or without a tax increase, the voters are not going to support a tax increase until the city council has done the hard work of really going through that budget and showing how lean it is, if it is that lean, and that we have made these tough choices, whether that is a traffic enforcement unit or community policing. And if you want both traffic enforcement and community policing, this is what we're going to have to cut to get there. But I don't think we can wait until the end of that budget cycle. I don't think we can wait for a tax increase on the ballot to begin to make those incremental investments.
The question is interesting. There's, as I said a minute ago, there's an $84 million general fund. Of that fund, $41 million goes to fire and police. That's about half. Added to that is our transportation part of the budget, and the transportation, fire, and police consists 2/3 of the budget within the general fund. Then we pay for Parks and Rec out of the general fund, which is about $6 million. Then we pay for the administrative part of city government, as well as health services. If we want to add 9 police officers, we're going to have a tax increase unless we want to slash Parks and Rec by 20%, or slash health or administration by $1 million a year. I mean, it's just not possible. And so, at least to me, we don't have a significant crime problem in Columbia. For me, an incremental increase by adding gradual FTEs over the course of time makes the most sense.
Yes, sir.
One of the little undercurrents of the city, we brag on what a great city it is, and we all believe it's a great city. We have several undercurrents that I think need addressed. Columbia's personal income growth has been flat and has only taken a bump in the last year or two. The number of kids in the Columbia School District who are on free and reduced lunches at 50%. Our economic base for this, to get ourselves out of the cycle of poverty, has been decimated. We have no professional gray-collar jobs. Our industry on Route B and Lamone Industrial is pretty much just decimated. And yet every problem we've talked about today, the only solution I've heard is more money, more taxes. So how can we take a population who, and another thing we have that's kind of a dirty little secret, is we have one of the highest underemployment rates in the state. So you've got all these little things that are piling up on us. How do we justify going to the taxpayers who are overburdened now and ask for more money?
Yeah, I'm not proposing that we do that. One really piece of good news, I think, great piece of good news is Larry Potterfield's decision to buy 400 acres next to the airport and develop into an industrial complex. Because I have to think that Mr. Potterfield knows what he's doing. He's kind of had a little bit of success in that regard. And I would assume that there are going to be a whole bunch of jobs that come out of that. Jobs and education are the solution to any issue of poverty. And so I'm hopeful that Mr. Potterfield's plans will improve the job opportunities for people within Columbia. But we can also, the City of Columbia, the various nonprofits, the University of Missouri, the unions, if we can get to the same, if we can get them all in the same room working in the same direction and not competing with each other, we hopefully can affect the job market in a positive way. And with jobs, well, I'll stop.
You haven't heard me say today, Mr. Schuster, that we're going to automatically raise taxes, and I want to be clear about that. That's why I think we need to go through that budget and really provide that public choice before we go ask voters to raise any property taxes, sales taxes, hotel taxes, and restaurant taxes to pay for the things that the city wants. And when I hear that flat income growth, that's why I think my response to Mr. Griggs is so important. Because we have the disparate elements here right now that Ready and the City of Columbia can aggregate and really bring to bear on a workforce that can show them with education and hard work and experience can work their way into a better paying job. And I think those companies in turn are going to be attracted to Columbia because we have this ready-to-work workforce. On the financial services side, there's a shortage of IT providers or IT information technology workers right now. If we can develop that curriculum at a mobile area community college or Columbia College or MU in their computer science program, Veterans United, Shelter, State Farm, all these financial service entities are going to be attracted to Columbia because of that. So I want to be clear.
Kevin.
Mr. Treece, you alluded to the number of lawsuits that the city's facing. What is your stance on that, and what do you think you can do, or what both do you think you can do on the number of lawsuits that they're facing? I mean, what would you do to change the current environment of the city with the number of lawsuits they're facing?
Well, and I think part of them are, I think many of those lawsuits are directly attributable to what I'll call mixed messages coming out of the administration. We're 100% out of infrastructure. And that remark tipped off a lawsuit between the county and the city on TIF. It generated the lawsuit on the Opus repeal effort. Had those remarks never been uttered, or had they been walked back and clarified, I think both of those lawsuits would have gone away. We have a Zim Schwartz, we have a Rob Sanders lawsuit still pending. And I don't know how many hundreds of thousands of dollars in legal fees and outside counsel the city has incurred, not the least of which are the settlements that are probably going to be compelled there. All of which I think goes to some problems with management and how we communicate, how we reward and retain our city employees.
The Opus lawsuits in particular were ill-advised, and I always knew that to be true, and that they didn't get past the judge initially is all the proof you need. They shouldn't have been filed in the first place. They had no basis in fact or in law. And it's a shame that we spent so much time and angst over those lawsuits that went nowhere and never could have gone anywhere. So, you know, then there's the lawsuit with the county, and clearly the city-county relationship is frayed. My relationship with all of the county office holders is a very good one. Because I've worked in this town for 37 years, I've developed relationships with all of the county office holders, and I know that I can immediately eliminate the strife and the friction between the city and the county so that we can work cooperatively and move Columbia and Boone County forward.
This is a question for both of you. Would you take a moment and share with us what you would like to accomplish in the first 120 days of your administration, if you're fortunate enough to be elected, and how does that play into your long-term goals?
Sure.
Yeah, thanks, Mike. One thing that I want to do is propose that the City of Columbia create a position called an ombudsman position. That person would act as a liaison or a resource for neighborhood associations when they're confronted with development proposals in their neighborhood. Right now, many neighborhood associations don't have the resources to hire attorneys like me or to engage in an effective communication with the developers. The developers typically have an upper hand, which isn't good for either side. And with an ombudsman position, the neighborhood associations would have more information, more resources, and there'd be more of an even playing field when it comes to development decisions. And I think that benefits neighborhood associations as well as those who choose to develop within an association. That would be number one. Number two, create a more transparent city government by going out and meeting regularly with the neighborhoods, with various neighborhoods, by using the schools throughout the City of Columbia.
Probably have 3 or 4 things, Joe. First, I would ask the council to join me in asking Ready to engage on that Veterans United headquarters issue, but also my job training initiative, and see if we can't engage community college and Columbia College and Moberly Area Community College and Stevens and MU with our major employers to really develop that job corridor, if you will, towards higher paying jobs. The city manager has declared this the year of the airport. If we want to try to put something on that August ballot, I think you're going to have to start engaging that hotel community now, engaging the city of Jefferson as well as the FAA on those improvements that we want to see so that we can get that project in the pipeline. I think third, we need to stay on top of our law enforcement and fire protection issues. And with or without a tax increase, we have to improve the funding that we dedicate there. And then I think the underlying current here that we heard loud and clear in the Downtown Leadership Council is the public's lack of confidence in how well the city plans for growth. And I think we need to improve the transparency in how those decisions are made.
I appreciate that everybody probably has some other questions, but in the interest of time, I'm going to go ahead and move to the closing remarks. And Mr. Treece, we'll start with you 1 minute.
Well, great. Thank you again, and it's a pleasure to be here. And I'm glad Dave Griggs asked the jobs question, because I was going to use that in my closing remarks to really stimulate the discussion as to how we develop beyond just the social equity component that Mr. Thomas mentioned, but how we begin to develop an economy here that really connects the dots between all of the opportunities that Columbia has to offer. I came here to college 30 years ago, and what I fell in love with, our downtown community, our trail, its proximity to Kansas City and St. Louis. We need to embrace what makes Columbia unique from Chesterfield and Blue Springs and Lee Summit, and that's our people. It's our downtown. It's our historic preservation, if you will, that really dramatizes why Columbia is what it is. And I think the skill set that I have used in my last 25 years transfers well to the challenges that we face. I think it'd be time for a new generation of leadership to begin to attract those employers and those partners to Columbia's economy and really grow in a way that we can all be proud of.
Mr. Walther.
We're running for mayor. It's the leadership position in Columbia. And I started out and honed my skills in the Boone County Prosecutor's Office under Joe Mosley for 2.5 years, and I handled thousands of criminal cases. That is an awesome responsibility, because what we're doing as prosecutors is dealing with the most fundamental right that all of us have, and that's the right of liberty. And in making decisions with respect to these thousands of cases, I had to take into consideration the opinions of the public, the police, victims, witnesses, defense attorneys, and defendants. And I had to weigh all of those various opinions in arriving at a decision. And so what you have to do as a prosecutor is use your best judgment, listen to all of the information, look at all of the evidence, and make the fairest decision you can. That's exactly what the mayor of Columbia has to do. It's the same process, and it's one that I'm very familiar with, and that's all.
Thank you, gentlemen. A round of applause for our
I'd like to welcome our third Ward City Council candidates to come forward, Karl Skala and Tom Leuther. Sorry, Tom. Same format that we've followed so far. We're going to begin with opening statements. That will be 2 minutes in duration, followed by 3 questions where they'll have 8 minutes to respond, and then a closing statement at the end. We'll alternate again, and Mr. Skala, we'll start with you with your opening statement.
Well, thank you. I probably don't need to introduce myself with this group. I've been a member of the Chamber Government Affairs Committee and the Chamber since 2004, but I'll introduce myself anyway. My name is Karl Skala. I'm running for the 3rd Ward City Council. I'm the 2-term incumbent in the city of Columbia. Let me just start out by saying that, Columbia, we all know this, Columbia is a great place to live. I intend to pursue a course to make it even better. It has the lowest unemployment rate in the state. Its cost of living is 5% below the national average. It's consistently ranked near the top in national lists of best performing cities and best places for small businesses and careers. I think this group could appreciate that. It has the cleanest independent financial audit in the last 20 years. And I'm running for re-election because I believe that the Third Ward has been neglected for a long time. And I want to continue to get results for the Third Ward. Growth has outstripped the roads and city services such as snow removal and police coverage. We all know that. With the projects I've sponsored during my council terms, we're catching up. We still have a long way to go. Multiple projects are underway, including a new North Side Police Station, an East Side Substation, road improvements on Ballinger Lane and Keene Street. Bus shelters are funded and are also on the way. I have the experience and familiarity with how the city works to get results, and I want to make the Third Ward an even better place to live, learn, work, and play. And I deliver. That's a fact.
Well, I'm Tom Leuther. Many of you know me because I consistently come to government affairs here at Chamber of Commerce. And listening to some of the issues that are going on here in the city, I've gotten very concerned. And as my opponent says, Third Ward's been overlooked by his leadership. And anyway, the four things that I really want to see Columbia improve on is public safety. People don't feel safe walking the streets. People don't feel safe walking downtown. And I want to see an improvement in our public safety. Also, economic development. When my opponent voted 3 times against having CVS built here, I wondered why would we vote against job growth? Why would we vote against a company that said we'll make improvements on the infrastructure there at Broadway and Providence? And they also said they would make improvements on 4th Street and give an additional $700,000 to the city. That's $345,000 of generated taxes for our city. That's 40 to 50 jobs for our city, plus sales revenue. So that's one reason why I want to run. Number 2, transparency. I think transparency is so important. Of course, my opponent in September 15th of 2015, September 21st, 2015, he voted against public hearings for our police department and our city employees. And I think, well, where's the transparency going to be at if we keep on doing voting that particular and have those particular type of votes? So infrastructure, transportation, economic growth, and public safety are the reasons why I'm running for city council.
Thank you very much. We will have the first of 3 questions, and we'll start with you, Mr. Leuther. Do you support building a new terminal building at Columbia Regional Airport, and how would you propose paying for this expansion?
I do support increasing our terminals there in Columbia because I believe that having more opportunities for air traffic will generate more business for the city of Columbia. One of the things I thought the mayor expressed very well at one of our Rotary meetings was that because we didn't have a one-stop airport here at Columbia, in other words, going to Chicago, like Councilman Thomas said, going from Chicago to Columbia, it hindered businesses from overseas to want to develop here. So I thought that was an excellent idea, also Dallas-Fort Worth. But I think as we grow, we're going to need more air transportation to provide for those types of businesses and make it more accessible. How are we going to go about paying for it? Well, I'm very encouraged by Mr. Potterfield's development out there at the airport. I think economic growth will generate revenue for the city and for the airport. And but first of all, I think we need to get a plan, and that's a plan to expand and a plan to expand once we get the terminal built. Mr. Skala.
Yes, of course, I certainly support economic development as it relates to the airport. It's one of the legislative priorities the Chamber has in its Government Affairs Committee, along with economic growth, interestingly sustainable economic growth, which I would emphasize. We do have a plan. We've been briefed on the plan. We have a consultant that is talking about the plan. It's offered 3 options for the plan. And that plan will not only expand the facilities at the airport, but it will also provide for the security that Mr. Treece was referring to that we need along with the airport, along with added facilities to enhance our ability to handle the traffic. We have the support of the university. We have the support of the Chamber. We have the support of the community. There is a lot of support. We even had guarantees on attracting some of the airlines here that we paid back those guarantees with because we had tangible results here. So this is something that really is a win-win situation for the entire community. We are funding all of this through a transportation sales tax, which has to be balanced between airport, transportation, and road repair. But given the amount of subsidies that we can match with federal funds, it would be a no-brainer not to support this kind of initiative.
Karl, we'll begin with you. And the second question is, do you support changing to a form-based zoning system as outlined by the consultant hired by the city?
I actually do, and the reason that I do is not because it's any personal agenda that I have, even though I think it's a good idea. It really has to do with the visioning process that we went through many, many years ago, which was enhanced by a reaffirmation in terms of the comprehensive plan that we just passed, Columbia Imagined, a couple of years ago, which I'm proud to say that I was involved in by hiring the first consultant to put the first $200,000 into this plan for growth management planning that led to the comprehensive plan. In that comprehensive plan, it states without equivocation that form-based zoning is something that the folks really want in this community in terms of making this a more attractive downtown. And I certainly would get on board with what the folks want in this community.
I support it to a certain degree. In other words, I think it should be on a base-by-base issue. There are some places that we don't need to have a two-story facility. CVS is one of those situations. They didn't need a second story, a working second story, but they did comply to the regulations, the building and code regulations, and made the height high enough to be 2 stories, but they didn't have they had a working 2-story, but it was still voted against. The city council still voted against it. So I'm for some of it to a degree, but then other times we just need to look at it and ask ourselves, is this appropriate for this particular neighborhood? And if it's not appropriate for this neighborhood, then we don't necessarily need to have form-based development.
Thank you. The third question, Tom, we'll begin with you, is what specific steps would you take as a member of the city council to improve public safety?
I believe prioritizing our budget is the most important thing we can do. When the citizen survey came out saying that public safety is the #1 concern for the people of Columbia here, I believe we ought to make that the #1 concern on our budget. Increase that budget to match those particular funds for our public safety. So that's what I would look at, is prioritizing that. That might mean that some of our non-essential programs we may have to do away with, or we may have to put them on a shelf, so to speak, for a little bit and not be able to fund them. But let's make what the citizens of Columbia really a priority first, and prioritizing our budget.
Well, I think without question, public safety is probably the top priority in this city. And frankly, I would point to the fact that without any tax increases and with the failure of the property tax, 30-cent property tax increase in 2014, we have nonetheless increased police patrol officers by 9 and firefighters by 5 in this community. And that was right out of the general fund. That is exactly the kind of thing that my opponent is referring to when we talk about where we can get resources within the context of where we are right now. You can talk all you want about how we ought to, and everyone does, about how we ought to increase public safety and hire more police officers. My daughter's a police officer in Columbus, Ohio. I know something about this. They cost $125,000, and they cost that amount for 20 years because you don't hire a police officer unless you guarantee that kind of career choice. It's very expensive. We do need a dependable revenue stream beyond the general fund, or to supplement the general fund, so that we can hire enough police officers. And I'm not sure that we need to go to the 2.5 that is recommended nationally. I would be happy with 2. We're at 1.4 as some of the mayoral candidates suggested. But we certainly do need to put more funding into public safety.
Okay. Questions from members of the audience? If I get eye contact with you, that means you're going to get it. Yes, sir.
You know, the police department, when you talk to the police and the sheriff's department, they say they spend 70 to 80% of their time chasing the same 80%. You know, and if you look at the paper every night, a lot of these people have been arrested 10 or 20 times. Isn't it time that we do something about it? But we're really, and another thing is really, we've had a lot of things about pensions and every priority. We're having one of the largest tax increases in Boone County history voted on this Tuesday. But how do you, I mean, you look at other budgets and stuff, I mean, we really have a revenue problem. Is there any idea that could help with that?
So your question is specifically asking
Yeah.
the candidates, what strategies would they take to address a revenue problem?
Right.
Yeah.
Who's next?
Do we have time? I think we have time.
Oh, okay.
Sorry, Sweden. Karl.
Well, again, it's Carlson.
No, I'm sorry, we ended with Karl.
Okay.
It's my fault. Go ahead.
Again, economic growth is very important for our city. You know, when our three driving economic forces is the university, medical, and insurance, and I think that's not a very good portfolio to derive from. So I'm all for bringing in more education, to bring in training for both blue and white collar type jobs here in Columbia. And I'm also for bringing in more economic development businesses that will generate tax revenue for our city.
Well, I can't disagree that economic development doesn't bring in additional revenue. I'm not sure it keeps up with infrastructure. If that were the case, we wouldn't have these infrastructure exigencies. But nonetheless, when it comes to public safety, and Tom has a good point here in terms of how we fund this. It's no secret that we have kind of let the school board dictate property taxes. There is now, with this increase, even before the increase, the property tax for the school district is 12 times what the city's is. Cities is 41 cents per hundred evaluation. The school tax is about $12.65. So we've kind of let that go, and that's one of the reasons why the property tax initiative in 2014 did not pass. It was asking too much. I would have hoped it would have been half that much, maybe 10 or 15 cents, then maybe it would have passed, but it did not. So the only other alternative is to look at sales tax. We only pay 2 cents out of the almost 9 cents of sales tax that is assessed in this community, and then there are CIDs and so on and so forth. On the other hand, we're losing a tremendous amount because of internet sales.
Yes, sir.
What are your thoughts on Reddy's operations in the city, and how do you support that or not?
Boy, would I love to talk about that. And the reason I would is because I think Reddy is doing yeoman's work for economic development in this community. The only criticism I have of Reddy, the only criticism I still have of Reddy, is the fact that it started out with 5 or 6 members under Bill Watkins initially. And it has grown to about 18 members. And the representation of the city is still 2 members on that group. That group is, we subsidize, the city subsidizes that group to the tune of $450,000, every dollar of which is well spent. But I think we ought to have better representation in that group. To its credit, the current economic development director and the past economic development director have kind of gotten away from attracting the big business, even though I voted for IBM, and that's another story about how we were not let into that whole thing. I just supported the $3 million subsidy. But to its credit, we're talking about the other 2 legs of the economic development thing, and that's retention and entrepreneurship. And they're doing wonderful work in that regard. There is, and everybody knows this in Reddy, there is another hot prospect in the 3rd Ward that could deliver 250 jobs for a manufacturing plant, and I would love to see that happen in the 3rd Ward.
Well, I would answer that question like this. Reddy just had an economic conference where they're working with the university and new ideas where they're trying to recruit new business and new business owners to develop these particular businesses. And I don't really see the need of any more municipal interference with Reddy at this particular time. I think they're doing a great job on their own, and they stand on their own.
Thank you. We'll go one more question, if you don't mind. I'll go Larry here.
In 2014, gentlemen, when the property tax was turned down for law enforcement, during a forum here at the chamber, the mayor admitted that the actual dollars in the city budget are comparable to the cities that we use for comparison sakes. That property tax rates were low, but our sales tax rates were higher. but the actual dollars in our budget were very comparable, but we were choosing to spend our money on other priorities. How would you identify those priorities and refocus those priorities to law enforcement and public safety rather than the soft issues?
I believe we need to go through our city budget and find out where some of that money is being spent. When I talked to the mayor, he told me about $73 million of Contactro agreements, and I said, well, what are they used for? And so trying to find out what our money is really used for and how it's really being spent. For instance, we have a lot of good, educated people on our commissions, and they bring great ideas, but then we turn around and we hire consultants to turn around and get another opinion. And since we have such good educated people on our city staff and in these commissions, I'm thinking, why don't we use some of their suggestions and put some of their ideas to practice here in the city?
Well, my opponent's answer suggests it's inexperience. We have actually looked at the budget. We've looked at the budget for many, many, many years. And in fact, and I would be disappointed if Mr. Schuster didn't ask me a question in this forum. But let me answer your question, and that is 80% of our, although there are some other benchmark cities that have comparable budgets that we do, very few of them are the kind of full-service cities that we're talking about that own a railroad and own a utility and own all of the other kinds of things that we do. 80% of our budget is already spoken for. It's only the general fund that is something around $85 million.
That's what we were speaking of, the general fund.
That's fine. And of that general fund, as was stated earlier by some of the mayoral candidates, half of that is really dedicated to public safety, 2/3 of that is dedicated to public safety plus roads, and only 1/3 goes to everything else, public health, other kinds of issues that you would not really want to cut. This is not fluff. We have tightened our belt. We have an incentive-based budgeting plan, and if you study the budget, you will know that there just is not the kind of fat that you are suggesting the budget has.
I want to thank everybody for their questions. We're going to go ahead and it's now time for closing statements. And Tom, about 1 minute for a closing statement, and we'll go to Karl.
Well, again, thank you for having me. And my main interest is to build a future for the city of Columbia. And I believe if we're going to have economic development and we're going to have a stronger city, then we need to have public safety. Our property values go down whenever there's the news reported about shots being fired in our neighborhood. 2 neighborhood associations are hiring off-duty police officers right now for protecting their particular neighborhoods. The city of Columbia's parks has hired a security company to protect our parks. And so I believe that we need to really prioritize our public safety and make that a #1 emphasis here that will draw economic development and make Columbia a better city to live in.
Well, we are prioritizing public safety. That is the #1 priority. It certainly was in my campaign. It is with the mayoral candidates as well. And Mr. Thomas suggested I could kind of reiterate the same points that he suggested and go down the list. From public safety, better roads and city services, to good jobs, to a fighting chance. And that has to do with the strategic plan and equity. And equity kind of gets to all of these issues. Equity in terms of infrastructure, equity in terms of racial equity. We're having some of those issues in town. Equity in terms of social equity. And the city has arranged its strategic plan around underserved areas, particularly those in the 1st, 2nd, and 3rd wards, to deal with some of these issues. You know, once again, I have the experience and familiarity to deal with some of these issues, particularly in the 3rd ward, but citywide as well. And there are a long list of accomplishments here, all the way from the comprehensive plan to roads and improvements on the ground, including public safety and the 9 police officers and firefighters that we've hired. I deliver, and I can promise you I will continue to do that.
Thank you, gentlemen. Let's give all of our candidates a round. This concludes our candidate forum. I appreciate the candidates coming out. I appreciate all of you coming out, the wonderful questions. I think that was fabulous. Please remember to vote on Tuesday, April 5th. Please consider the responses that you heard today. That concludes our forum. Have a great
Nice to meet you.